And welcome back to Posting Through It, FBI.com, FBI, the website, FBI, the podcast, the official podcast of Cash Patel. Cash Patel, Cash Money. No, I'm Jared Holt.
I'm Mike Hayden.
You seemed almost disappointed. I'm sorry, Mike.
I'm not.
Some Patreon shout-outs at the beginning here. We've got Leanne, Christopher Wendell, and Russell Craig. And our listener music this week is Now It Can Be Told by Tractor Boy, which was sent to us by Steve, who's part of Tractor Boy and also listens to Posting Through It. Tractor Boy is a Chicago area hard rock band. Steve described this track to me as a, quote, open letter to Alex Jones from a globalist corporation, confirming all of Alex's worst fears. One line in this song is just, "Gay frogs unite."
Way to tailor to our audience.
Yeah, it's got a good grind. So I'll play a clip of that before we get to Bob here.
Have you heard of the bad boy? We got him over in accounting. His manager is a Mothman, and he's aware that the tensions are mounting. Our CFO is in overdrive. He's putting all kinds of deals.
And welcome back to the podcast, New York City correspondent, Bobby Silverman.
Hello to the Posting Through Iters. It's the New York City correspondent, Bobby Silverman. I'm here to talk about a very important, institution in the city of New York, which is where I am from, which is the New York Knicks.
That's the basketball, right?
Yeah. They play professional basketball, allegedly.
You can go pro at that?
Assumes facts not in evidence, counselor.
It's just a game, though. You can make a living with that?
You can make a pretty good living, let me tell you.
Well, I just want to interject here that we were recording on Saturday, and so we don't know if the Knicks have effectively choked all the way yet. We don't know. We still have, it's by the time we're actually going to end here, and then the score will be accumulating. I think, right?
Yeah.
Bob?
Yeah,
I think so.
I got the game. I'm gonna have the game in a corner of my computer screen. So when Mike does his blah 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 blah, I don't get bored.
Okay, that's important. And I also feel like we should mention, Jared, that this is our 100th episode. It feels like it could be any number of episodes, but this is the 100th.
I feel like for the 100th episode, I should have brought on a Chugger and the Beeve style morning radio sound effects board, so you guys wouldn't have to do your bespoke sound effects, so you could really lean into the bit. But sorry, Amazon didn't deliver it on time. That's on me.
I don't know. That's a lot of staying power, and I think we found some ways to potentially celebrate at the end with Bob, who I know many listeners have requested that we bring Bob back, so we brought him back for the 100th.
I'm honored.
We took his handcuffs off and told him he could get out of Mike's office closet for about an hour or so and do another episode with us.
Look, have you guys seen New York City real estate prices? Mike's being kept in a GIMP costume in Mike's basement is definitely worth it for the square footage alone.
So Bob was a co-author on a very big piece in Wired magazine a couple weeks ago. I think it's still under a paywall, Bob, last I checked. You know, for people who can't access it, you're going to hear a lot of it soon, and then you'll be very eager, I'm sure, when they drop the paywall to read it if you haven't paid. If not, pay for it. That's what you should do, right? Pay for it. So this story, and Bob, I would urge you to interject here, is the degree to which this may affect everybody is that rich people, very, very rich people in the United States, can effectively buy and build their own private NSA. Is that the subtext of this story? Because it seems like logical that this could happen, but us being sort of trusting stupid lambs walking through the world never put two and two together that like some of the tech that the government has can be acquired by private entities. Let's say it could be anybody like Elon Musk or Mark Andreessen, but in this case, it is a guy named James Dolan.
Yeah, that is absolutely true, Mike. It's a story about Madison Square Garden and its owner, James Dolan, a entitled Nepo baby who is thin-skinned, paranoid, generally incompetent, a bully, always sees himself as a victim, deeply vindictive, and, these are traits you may recognize in some of our other finer members of the billionaire aficionado community or, the government. But what we've learned by this story is that, yes, James Dolan has built a panopticon, not just inside Madison Square Garden, but really on the streets surrounding the arena. And in the case of at least one former player, surveilling him all the way down hundreds of miles away where he was conducting a basketball camp, according to our sources, because he could. And the truth is that both the technology that Dolan uses is available really to anyone who has, this much real estate. It just depends on the desire to use it.
James Dolan, in my mind,
Mhm.
going back to when I was a kid, was always, or I mean, I don't know when the first time I remember even hearing from him. Maybe it was teens. I can't recall. But he was always brought up as like a pre-internet lolcow. He was a very wealthy guy who kind of got toys to play with, etc.
Yes.
He was like the sort of the foil to Pee Wee Herman who wants his bike in Pee Wee's
That's
Big
fair.
Adventure. I forgot the
That's fair.
character's name.
For
Yeah.
a pocket history of James Dolan is that his father, Charles Dolan, was the founder of Cablevision, which was one of the big cable networks in New York City. The Cablevision empire expanded throughout the 90s and the 2000s, and at one point they purchased Madison Square Garden and the Knicks. And Charles Dolan's no good Knicks son, James, was brought on to operations and eventually by his father handed control of the reins of the team and the arena. And in addition, the New York Rangers hockey team, and for a brief period, the New York Liberty WNBA team. Madison Square Garden has since acquired other venues in and around New York City. They own the storied institution Radio City Music Hall. They own the Beacon Theater. If you're in Chicago, Jared Holt, they own the Chicago Theater as well.
Oh,
Yeah, and of course, the real golden nugget in James Dolan's burgeoning tech and media empire is the Sphere in Las Vegas. And save for the Chicago Theater, where Illinois law prevents the use of private surveillance technology by businesses, all of these places use facial recognition to surveil every single person who walks in the arena. And also, they use their in-house, basically deep state to surveil employees, fans, players, lawyers they don't like, reporters they don't like, protesters outside Madison Square Garden they don't like. Anyone who gets on James Dolan's bad side and happens to venture anywhere near his turf is swept up by this dragnet.
in recent years, people have heard of companies like Palantir. They build a lot of surveillance tech and military tech. Is the technology available to the ultra wealthy similar in caliber to what is being sold to the government? Is it the same?
That I can't say with 100% certainty. The MSG began using facial recognition tech in 2018. It was only reported that it was being used as of 2023, but it really has grown by leaps and bounds. The initial version of what MSG had was really kind of a basic system. There were, cameras placed in a couple of places, and it couldn't surveil people very well in real time, which is to say, you buy a ticket, you walk through the doors, and in the past, what would happen is the technology was really sort of an after the fact way of looking up someone who had already come on their radar through more, hands-on means, like, security notice someone.
They cause some kind of issue or
Yeah.
something like that.
Right, exactly. It was kind of an after the fact thing, but it's a lot better now, I think that according to our sources is very clear.
if you go and you're like, take a couple tabs of acid and you go to watch Fish and you watch this like, cartoon Muppet hot dog fly at your face or whatever that stuff, are you getting your photo taken like in that
Yes.
time? And the second question is that legal?
Yes, and for now in New York State, yes. Basically, once you buy that ticket, the terms and conditions of that ticket, you are giving away your rights to be surveilled by paying for that ticket. That's what happens. You do not have a choice in the matter. So yeah, if you go to a Fish concert, your face will be scanned, fed into the MSG system, and if they so incline, they will then use the tools that, reporters have had access to for a long time, and government entities and police departments have had, which is, okay, now that we've identified this person, how can we scrape the net to figure out everything about them? Once everything is fed into the system, there is sort of an insider group of Madison Square Garden security executives. We do not know exactly who they are. One source described them as like a council, which sort of picks and chooses faces that should be on the watch list run by this company, eConnect, that is in charge of their facial recognition tech. And you get a score. And that score you get determines how much of their time and energy they are going to spend watching you using, physical security personnel. They'll have someone follow you around. We saw this with this streamer named Garrett Fedewa, who goes by GFed online. And GFed's whole bit is that he goes to as many stadiums around the country as he can, and he sort of gets the lay of the land. Occasionally, he tries to stay after hours. But he was on MSG's radar before he ever walked in the building. Why? His name, pinged security, and they saw all of his Instagram videos and TikTok videos, and from the moment he walked into the building, he had a tail on him. Why was GFed a kind of a person that MSG should be worried about? Who knows? But if you watch the videos, which are embedded in the story, you can see him filming on his camera, and there's a security guy, 25, 30 feet behind him, trying to look innocuous and following him wherever he goes. Now, he wasn't tailed at the Sphere because sometimes MSG has difficulty sharing info between the various venues that it runs, but he went back to MSG and he was followed again. He hasn't done anything wrong.
May I ask, who is following him here?
In some cases, it'll just be like, the usual security guys, like the ticket, like ushers, basically.
Looking like Harrison Ford in Conversation, where he's got the little American flag lapel pin and he just shows up in elevators next to you.
Those guys are a little higher up. I just mean, the guys in red jackets who will bust your chops if you try to move down at halftime during a bad game. Those kind of guys are sent to tail. Depending on the security threat level that you have been tagged with by MSG. Basically, everyone who walks through MSG is rated on terms of a threat. If it rises up high enough, they'll start digging. And if it's something that they're concerned about ahead of time, you may find yourself being followed by the equivalent of a low-level Stasi informant while you're just trying to watch, a WWE match or the Knicks or whatever, or Fish.
Wow.
Well, to you, what's the significance of having this kind of miniaturized security state around Madison Square Garden specifically? I mean, it is one of the top venues in the country.
Well, Dolan has a really sort of, Dolan, in one of his rare and I swear to God, delightful TV appearances on Fox 5 News with Rosanna Scotto, was talking about the technology. And she goes to him, well, what is this technology? And he says, well, you ever see somebody and you recognize their face? That's facial recognition.
Okay, I mean, in a literal sense, that's true.
Yeah,
I mean, but
it's not just facial recognition.
No,
though.
it's let me just break this down. Okay, so
Sure.
As with all of this stuff, it is presented as being for safety. Yes, Madison Square Garden has been, is, and always will be a potential site where a terrorist could do some real damage. So MSG is their front-facing explanation is this is about security. a concert goes haywire. There is some kind of terrorist threat. We need to be able to identify those people quickly in order to keep our customers safe. They present it as we are trying to protect you, the people who just want to enjoy a game, from harm. From our reporting, that doesn't really hold water. It's not like MSG has access to the FBI's most wanted list. It's not like someone who is a real threat, if they know it, and they get pinged by facial recognition, they can immediately, I don't know, call the feds or call the cops. It's not used for that. There are also serious questions about whether MSG security, if they did encounter someone who was a potential terrorist threat, what they could do. Like, these guys are not trained to deal with real threats because they're not cops. They're ex-cops, they're ex-military, they're ex-three-letter agency guys, but they are not the police. They coordinate with the police, but it's not like this system is serving as a real deterrent. What it is good for is James Dolan surveilling his personal enemies and going after them.
You know, 'cause there's so many things to talk about in this piece, but you also mentioned bugging. Like, some of the Knicks players have had reported being in places where they thought they were going to be bugged, or they expected they were bugged, or they perhaps even had evidence of being bugged. What kind of technology are they using here? Again, I'm thinking of the film, The Conversation.
Right.
And, you know, just what's going on there? Tucker Carlson voice, what's going on?
I mean, look, we've got stories going back. There is a story from 2001 when Dolan had only recently taken over the Knicks and the Rangers and the Garden, about MSG employees feeling like their phones were tapped. And we're talking very rudimentary, really exactly like The Conversation or Enemy of the State for you 90s movies fans, about recording conversations. You know, when we're talking about recordings, you know, it's an arena, it's wired for sound. There are all kinds of ways to capture just regular dialogue. There's, in fact, a famous incident in 2013 when Dolan felt that Carmelo Anthony was being unfairly trash-talked on the court. He nearly came to blow, like he got really in the face of Kevin Garnett.
For people who don't know sports, Carmelo Anthony was a very big star.
Yes, of the New York Knicks.
Who once scored, 63 points in a game once?
62, Michael, 62 points in a game,
okay.
Thank you.
Whatever it was.
Anyway, Carmelo Anthony, the Knicks star, was getting trash-talked during a game, so James Dolan wanted to prove to the NBA that he was dealing with something unfair. So he sat these two guys with long, stringy black hair and a goatee, wearing all black, looking like Apex AV Tech guys, holding parabolic mics and sitting on the baseline with a directional microphone pointed at Carmelo Anthony all game to prove that the trash talk was unfair. For sports fans, this came right in the aftermath of what we'll call the Honey Nut Cheerios incident, in which Kevin Garnett, as to trash talk Carmelo Anthony, supposedly told him mid-game, "Your wife tastes like Honey Nut Cheerios." And that set him off.
Well, those are some hard bars right there.
Yeah.
To put it mildly, like,
in fairness,
that's specific enough that it makes you stop and think. It's like, how does he know?
It's like, but also it's like, but then you're like running through. It's like, does she taste like Honey Nut Cheerios?
I'm glad we got that in. So there's a long history of James Dolan reading employees' emails, tapping phones, allegedly. Employees have complained that they were being surveilled. The press was not allowed to do anything without an MSG comms official nearby, so it was very hard to do any actual reporting at MSG. Like, he had all those tools at his disposal for the first 17 years that he was running this venue. Facial recognition allowed him to, and again, internet scrapes, deep dives, all of that, all the anti-privacy tools that are available, that just launched it, like what he's doing, to a complete other stratosphere.
You mentioned later in the piece that there's a psychological impact that surveillance has on people. And we know, I'm not blaming this necessarily on the Knicks' struggles right now in the playoffs, but historically, this has been a very, and especially in recent years, a very paranoid, fumbly franchise, as with every other team that you and I share. And I'm not saying that's because people are surveilled, but I want to just talk about just using that to tease out that this might be, pretty bad for people to live under this kind of
Oh,
threat.
oh, absolutely. I mean, there's a very long history. Like, when you know you are being watched, even if it's a passive kind of watching, even if you feel that okay, you know, you want to keep track of me while I'm walking around this while I'm walking around a supermarket, so you can better see which products I like, so that you can send me targeted advertisements to make sure I buy Fruit Loops the next time I come in. Yeah, okay, I don't care, that's annoying, whatever, but it changes people's behavior. It really does that. It affects the brain literally. It puts people when they know that they are under constant surveillance, even if it's not a conscious thought, if that is lying in the back of your mind, it really does trigger a fight or flight response. Like, being watched makes you feel as though you need to defend yourself. It puts you on guard in a way that's not even conscious. And well, so if you think, okay, look, I really want to see Billy Joel at Madison Square Garden, which I have a feeling listeners of this fine music podcast would probably pick a different artist. But regardless of who you want to see at Madison Square Garden, you say, okay, facial recognition will be on me. I don't care. No big deal. I'm just going to enjoy the show. You can't unplug the part of your brain that goes into the equivalent of a defensive crouch all the time. It is wildly detrimental to the concept of living in a free society. And I would argue that it is incredibly bad for people's well-being in the long term, beyond the fact that, to me, this all of this personally is an absolute violation of something as basic as the right to privacy.
I do think there's some psychological impact also just in when people are surveilled constantly, they're more likely to do some of the things that they're being surveilled to avoid not doing. Partly
Right.
because, if you're in a relationship that's not trusting, you know what I mean? You don't trust the relationship yourself. If you're
No.
like, I mean, that's as a broader thing. And then if you're being told like, don't, I don't know, it's your mom's like, don't look at porn or something, and it's like, oh, you can't do. I mean, it makes it so much more like, how can I figure out a way to get past this surveillance to look at porn? I mean, psychologically, I do think that human beings operate that way sometimes.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, as we cited in the story, there was a professor at a university in Sydney who did studies that you study what happens actually chemically to the brain when people are being surveilled. And there is a marked and pronounced change to the way you start thinking. And if you're being surveilled all the time, those patterns really do get hardwired. And it makes for a less pleasant existence, even though you yourself have committed no crime, violated no social norm, and done nothing wrong. It makes for a society that is as paranoid and hostile to everyone around them as I would argue that James Dolan is. He's built this an arena into an extension of his own paranoid fear. And the fact that the Knicks have won a few ball games, despite all that, is a miracle. As a long-suffering Knicks fan, Mike can attest to this, but I've always said that the team will never win squat as long as James Dolan owns the team. And I hate to say it, but I don't think he is ever going to sell the team.
So you're trying to break my spirit here.
Yes, correct.
Mentions for the psychological effects on the people being surveilled themselves. But the
Yeah.
story also unpacks how this kind of surveillance system has been used or suspected of being used to protect people who may have been, creating a toxic environment around the arena, right?
One of the ways in which is a bit like this is again not surveillance, but this is an example of what James Dolan asks his security chief, and we can talk about his security chief who's mentioned in the story, John Eversole, a fascinating man. He's, I think I personally would describe him. He's, of course, ex-military and a longtime security professional. He worked with Symantec. He worked with Oracle. And he's the kind of guy who always seems to be cosplaying as an even more brutish cop in a Paul Verhoeven movie.
He's an
Even though he
operator.
himself is an actual, ex-military and surveillance professional. He carries a gun around with him at Madison Square Garden for reasons that we can't really figure out, other than he likes to threaten people. There's a post of John Eversole's with a cat next to his gun that he posted online for reasons that really, truly baffle me. And John Eversole is, in a lot of ways, according to our sources, James Dolan's right-hand man and will do whatever he asks. So there's a woman, Kelly Croft. Kelly Croft was a masseuse who was flown out to California to serve as a masseuse. And according to her lawsuit, she alleges that she was sexually assaulted by Harvey Weinstein, James Dolan's longtime friend. And she filed a lawsuit accusing Dolan and Weinstein of sex trafficking because she was flown out of state. She is still considering possible appeals, but the case is no longer ongoing. But according to our sources, and according to a lawsuit that was filed by a former MSG security professional, which is what got us started on all this, really, John Eversole was directed to conduct surveillance on this woman who was suing James Dolan. If you are considered an enemy of the garden, or specifically James Dolan, he will have the people who are ostensibly in charge of keeping fans safe at the arena to look into your lives. According to, apparently one job by MSG security officials is to spend the morning going through social media and looking for tweets saying sell the team or Dolan sucks or whatever, collecting those, and then running those names through their security apparatus to find out stuff about them and potentially either ban them from MSG, have them followed at MSG, or in one case, there was a 14-year-old kid in Colorado who posted something rude directed at Dolan that may have gotten a little excessive to the point of being a little scary.
Is he a Knicks fan out in Colorado?
No,
or?
I don't know. That we don't know. He's a hockey fan.
Was he a fan of the? Oh, he's a okay.
He's a hockey fan.
Anything goes, man. Could we? Sometimes you have just a heated hockey moment, and you just got to air something out.
He tweeted something that was very mean about that may have been perceived a little bit as a threat. But again, I want to stress that it's a 14-year-old kid.
Yeah, I'm sure it was very obvious.
It's not like Kosh Patel. He can't just go slam a beer in the locker room and take the edge off. He's got to get it out somehow.
He's got to post through it. In fact, so what James Dolan security did is they contacted law enforcement in Colorado and had the cops go to this 14-year-old kid's house for an untoward tweet.
So that's like what the Secret Service does. If you go online and you're like, I think the president should be killed, they have to investigate all of them. So it's
this is a common activity for MSG also. They often contact the cop.
This is just about a guy who owns a stadium and a team.
Yes.
This is just a guy who's rich.
Yes. If you want to work for James Dolan, you do what James Dolan says. And what James Dolan wants his security team to do is to go after his own personal another personal enemy of Dolan that I think is worth mentioning here is the ex-Knick great Charles Oakley. And Charles Oakley was my favorite Knick when I was in my teens because Oak is a badass. And
he's a very physical player for people who aren't familiar. He would get a lot of body contact,
Charles
a lot of
Oakley, Charles Barkley, who does not back down to anyone, scared of Charles Oakley. Charles Oakley has taken on a lot of people. He is not he's a real tough guy. Charles Oakley has been very critical of James Dolan. So starting at least in 2015, That meant when Charles Oakley, paying a ticket to watch the Knicks, would show up at a game, security would be on him. And this is something we reported in our story. Like, he's sitting there under the basket. They're playing the Charlotte Hornets. It's January 2015. Patrick Ewing, also a Knick legend, is an assistant coach with the Charlotte Bobcats. Hornets. They were the Hornets by then. He's an assistant coach with the Charlotte Hornets. And they're talking together. And Patrick Ewing leaves and walks away. And Charles is like, okay, we'll reconnect after the game. Immediately, 7 security professionals come up to Charles Oakley and remind him in a very forceful way that he is not to leave his ticketed seated area. Charles Oakley at halftime goes to the bathroom, and MSG security follows him into the bathroom to watch him pee. Why? Because that's what they were told to do. Afterwards, because again, I will stress that Charles Oakley doesn't give a crap, goes to go meet Patrick Ewing outside the Charlotte locker room. And he's telling the story about how, he's talking with him, and he's clearly venting his spleen about being followed around Madison Square Garden by security for no reason whatsoever. And Patrick Ewing says to him, watch what you say. This place is mic'd up.
Wow.
That was 2 years before. 2 years later, in a famous incident, Charles Oakley is sitting near the owner. According to Oakley, he didn't say or do anything, but shortly thereafter, another team of about, 6 or 7 security guards come up to Charles Oakley and are demanding that he leave. Charles Oakley says, no, I paid for my ticket. Either give me a refund or go away. And he refuses. And mid-game, MSG's rent-a-cops drag him physically from the arena, have him arrested. And then when asked about it, James Dolan says that Charles Oakley has anger management issues and also is probably an alcoholic.
Wow.
Jeez.
And we're talking about, just for people who are not really concerned about the sports angle in any way, which, I don't know. I can't really judge our audience to know. But it's important to know that these are like two, arguably 1 and 2, Ewing and Oakley would be the most recognizable stars of the 80s and 90s. I think there are other players in there that you could argue maybe John Starks might be on that level, but these are big stars and important given how much losing the team did after their era you'd think to try to want to set up a warm relationship with them.
This is slowly but surely Dolan has figured out that instead of making enemies of his ex-players, it's best to how can I phrase this delicately? Bring them into the fold and make them feel welcomed, possibly, and, feel like that their efforts sitting there courtside so fans can cheer for their old favorites, that they are duly compensated for their efforts at returning to the fold.
So we're kind of hopping around a lot of stuff. I mean, this is the story you guys put together has a ton of detail, and so much of it is interesting. And as somebody who's done a bit of reporting in my days, I'm surprised that you were able to source all of this up. And from reading the piece, it seemed like a lot of people were pretty nervous about it. I mean, somebody who has a miniature surveillance state built around an arena and is having people trailed across the country and stuff. I mean, what was the sense you got? I mean, people spoke to you and Noah for the story, but what was their vibe?
I'd first of all like to credit my co-byline on this piece, Noah Shackman, who did amazing work, and Noah really spoke to the majority of the sources who were able to detail how the security apparatus at Madison Square Garden works. I spoke to a few of them as well, and this is as close as I've personally ever gotten to doing real cloak and dagger stuff. I mean, we had someone deliver helpful information via what's called a brush pass. A brush pass is something you have 100% seen in a movie, but neither Noah, who, to be clear, is a renowned national security reporter, had never encountered before. A brush pass is when two people in a public space cross paths and the source puts an item in the reporter's pocket without pausing and walks in the other direction. So anyone observing them from afar, it would just look like two people passing each other as they're walking down the street. But in reality, a bit of samizdat has been passed from the source to the reporter. That has never happened to Noah before.
That's like
there was
Cold War shit.
Yeah, exactly. There was one point where Noah and I both spoke with a source, and that source insisted on having the entire conversation in 30-degree weather outside in a cafe because they were worried about a directional mic being pointed at them or something. It was never clear, but they were like, we met at a public place that had a bar that had an outdoor area, and we're like, okay, let's go inside and we'll find a quiet place to talk. And the source made it clear that in the middle of the New York City winter, he wanted us to have this conversation outside. The NDAs that MSG and the facial recognition company itself impose are incredibly stringent. These are the kind of things that if you're caught violating them, that will mess you up bad for a long time. People who work there get scared. Like, you have to live in terror to work at MSG in a lot of ways.
Well, it feels like to me that like rich people in this country right now have a lot of ways to ruin your life if they want to.
There are two ways, I think, and this is just my personal opinion, I want to make that clear. I think there are two ways to handle being an employee at MSG. Either you become as paranoid and as hostile as the guy signing the paychecks, or you don't last very long. I think I think working there, the only way to last will leave you a sort of skittering, crabbed, paranoid, terrified person, would be my personal opinion. And I feel really, all credit to the people who came forward to talk with us about this, and as well as, Donnie Ingrassalino, who was again, former law enforcement, former, Fed, and he went to the point of filing a suit for a number of disability claims and age discrimination claims. But in that lawsuit, he also detailed a lot of, he also laid out a lot of what had happened. Specifically, of course, the case of Nina Richards.
That's a good segue because I want to just talk a little bit about Nina Richards, who I had forgotten was a pseudonym. And she is a trans woman who becomes one of Mr. Dolan's obsessions, so to speak, or at least one of his targets. I think maybe that's. How does that come to be? Where do you learn about it?
We learned about her first from the lawsuit. What happened is she was a Sirius Knicks fan. And for a period that, according to our reporting, spans at least 2 years, MSG did not want her in the arena. They surveilled her. They watched her literally minute by minute. Where there is a confidential MSG security memo, which is included in the article, in which you can watch. There are photographs of her getting in an elevator, going to buy a snack at the game. There are photos of the social media posts that she made after the game. They literally track every single step that she took inside the arena because, according to Donnie Ingrassalino, the ex-MSG security professional's lawsuit, Madison Square Garden did not like the fact that she was, quote unquote, socializing with the players. They also were terrified of the fact that maybe during a Madison Square Garden, this fairly, visible and trans woman might show up on an MSG broadcast. It's made very clear that, for John Eversole, who we discussed before, she is described as his continuing obsession. In the lawsuit, it very clearly states that he, for some reason, kept her picture on his phone and would show it to people in security meetings. And the quote that is in the lawsuit is, and I apologize in advance for misgendering her, but I'm just going to quote John Eversole directly. "I don't want him or it or whatever it is in the arena ever again."
Oh, fuck, man.
But he also keeps the picture on his phone, I should point out.
Yes.
I think that's an important detail. He hates it so much that he's gonna keep it nearby.
But he's got to keep it by its side to remind himself about how much he's upset, how mad he is about this. I think posting through it listers with maybe who's taken a Psych 101 class or merely watched any MAGA influencer rail against trans people online can probably make some decent educated guesses about what is driving this obsession. MSG did not want a trans woman who was very clearly a Knicks fan, and I would hope is a Knicks fan, to attend their games.
You're saying she might have been chased away.
Yeah.
That's
They did
horrible,
not.
actually.
They,
It's like a
well,
little mini. It's not the most important thing here, but there's a little mini tragedy.
oh,
So
she.
imagine being a trans woman. You love the Knicks, and you're kind of getting close to the
Yeah.
organization. You like the vibe, and you have to learn to hate
You
the
got to give
Knicks.
it up. She had tens of thousands of Instagram followers while MSG was surveilling her. That Instagram account is gone. There no trace. We were able to find bits and scraps here and there, but there is almost no trace of her on the internet. She made it clear to us when we did contact her that she did not want to participate in this story in any way, shape, or form, and she requested that we not use her name, and we feel that the only choice we had was to honor that, absolutely, because this woman knew, to be clear, she knew that she was being surveilled, because these guys aren't really subtle when they're tracking you. And in fact, MSG security at one point, they were talking back and forth like, listen, we got to be more careful about this because this is both a trans woman and a trans woman of color, and they were worried that this person was going to hit them with a discrimination lawsuit of some kind, and rightly so.
Yeah, you think?
Yeah, she has been sort of scared off the internet, all because she decided that she liked this misbegotten basketball team. And sure, maybe you can't watch basketball. Okay, you can't post online anymore. Okay, are those grand tragedies? No, but I think it's a very clear indication of what life is like inside a surveillance state.
I would say it is a tragedy because the reason those things happened was because you were who you were.
Yeah.
I think that's a tragedy. I mean, it's
absolutely.
not death. It's not going to jail, but just the fact that it affects your life that severely at all.
Yeah.
Is horrible.
In the brief exchanges that Noah and I had with her, I think it was fairly clear that the idea of going, not let alone going on the record or even talking on Deep Background, was something that she very clearly did not want to do. I won't surmise as to why, but I have a pretty good guess. I mean, I spoke to a person who had taken her photo in one of the little bits of, social media marginalia that we were able to dig up. And I contacted this person who had taken her picture. And I said, I identified myself. I said, I'm a reporter. I'm with Wired Magazine. And before I could say her real name, the photographer said, I don't want to talk about it.
I just want to talk about the stigma and the this sort of backlash that would lead to the Knicks to doing that quickly, because it seems very particular. It seems like a kind of culture of secret that exists that is pretty sad and kind of led to this very thing.
In order to research the story, I looked at some of the jankiest websites you've ever seen, and
the gossip websites.
Yeah, even like sub Larry Brown Sports, for anyone who's interested in that particular.
I don't think many people in our audience know what that
that's
is.
a deep cut. That's a deep cut for you.
It's a deep cut for me personally. So.
Right. The relationship between athletes and the LGBT community, and just NBA locker rooms, to be clear, for those who've never spent time in one, it is not a bastion of progressive politics, as much as people have been screaming about how woke the NBA is because they wrote, end racism on the back of their jerseys during the COVID bubble season. The NBA is not a progressive institution. No sports league is a progressive institution, but the NBA sort of likes to hint about it and sort of, attach themselves to surface level.
It does feel like it's the
politics.
more like woke coded of the four.
And if you do surveys of fans, the NBA tends to attract more left of center people than other major sports. But a locker room is a different place altogether. And I think it is not a secret to say that if you go to an NBA locker room, you will hear, with reporters around and everything, you'll hear some pretty openly, homophobic comments, and no one bats an eye. That's the reality of professional and college sports. And if you want to draw conclusions about why these then relationships are not something that they feel that they could even begin to be open about, whether it's a gay relationship, whether it's a straight relationship with a trans woman, whether it's someone who is bi or whatever. Athlete culture is small c conservative by definition. That to me is why players who do have these sexual attractions anywhere across the rainbow spectrum feel like they have to stay in the closet. And I don't think that's a big secret to anyone either.
I just wanted to say, I've been with trans women and cis women. I like feminine partners personally. I do feel that talking about having sex with trans women is extraordinarily taboo, partly because it is so close to heteronormative behavior, right? Because it's all of a sudden it becomes like a huge challenge to the male, all of a sudden the ego, for some people in mainstream culture to be like, wait a minute, the questions, is this gay or something like that? But I just think it's really notable that we pretty much know that's happening in the NBA, and yet no one actually can talk about it because it's such a repressed environment.
Yeah. And I honestly don't think that's changing anytime soon, unfortunately. I'm not, look, I haven't been maybe I'm wrong. I haven't done any reporting from inside. Like, I haven't gotten credentialed at Madison Square Garden since 2015. That is when I was, I believe, on James Dolan's enemies list. Interesting story. I wrote a story in 2013 about the Knicks media policy for Vice.com, which is, about the Knicks antagonism towards the press. I wrote this, and I included some anonymous quotes from reporters. And minutes after the story was published, a member of the Madison Square Garden comms team started calling the beat guys and asking them if they were my source. Around that same time, I was credentialed. I was reporting something, and this is in the story. It's the really horrible thing about authoritarian regimes in which they are incredibly repressive and incredibly damaging and incredibly scary, but at the same time they're also fucking clowns and they're incompetent boobs. So I'm sitting there in the locker room. I'm waiting. There's a real pecking order in the press in the locker room, by the way. So I wasn't getting to really talk to anybody. All the beat guys got their bite at the apple first. The TV guys had their place. And I'm sort of bobbing on the perimeter trying to find someone to talk to in the locker room. And I noticed that there's a player who was not active for this game, and he's wearing street clothes. And he motions to an usher who comes back a few minutes later with a full movie tub bucket, like an extra large bucket of movie popcorn. And he's sitting there in the locker room just housing that popcorn. And I'm sitting there watching it and sort of smiling and laughing. And it wasn't related to the story that I was planning to write. So I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. And again, an MSG Comms staffer, like, sort of gruffly sort of grabs me by the shoulder, pulls me out of the locker room. And I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And he jabs a finger in my chest. And this is someone who I've never spoken to, never met. And he goes, if you report that, our relationship is over.
If you report on the popcorn?
I did not report on the popcorn until this Wired story. I kept that one hip pocketed for 13 years, man. And he goes, our relationship is over. Before I can even say, what relationship? He's like eyeballing me and doing the like, staring me down, and walks away. It was just so strange. I was like, I'm a freelancer. I'm nothing. Like, you think my little blog I think I wrote the story for the Classical for God's sake. If you really want to talk about deep cuts about sports blogs, is where the story that I reported ended up. And it made no mention of it. I think I was trying to figure out a way to shoehorn it in, but it was just weird and it didn't work. But, like, why are you doing that? Why are you leaning on me? I'm a nobody. I will not harm you. Even if I wrote it in this blog, nobody would pay attention. But they are so terrified, and they are living in this state of constant fear, which again, I think is a prerequisite for surviving for any period of time at MSG, that they see me watching a player eat popcorn, and that's a code red security threat to them. So at some point, I was trying to report a story for The Guardian a couple of years later, and my credentials were initially denied. And there was no reason given as to why, but they were like, no. And because it was this thing I was writing about Giannis Antetokounmpo, and the NBA wanted to promote it because there was a London game and et cetera, the NBA had to intervene on The Guardian's behalf to be like, let Bobby Silverman walk in the locker room and spend 2 minutes with Giannis, okay? And again, it's this, when you live in this mindset where everyone is an enemy, you behave in both violent and often bizarre ways. All you're doing is making me want to say, like, what are you trying to hide? It's really the, it's the not involved in human trafficking t-shirt meme. Why are you so paranoid? I mean, that's the thing about MSG. All this, like the reporting that we've done, we have a lot more questions about what it is that they are really trying to hide at Madison Square Garden. And if any posting through it listeners happen to be employees of the Madison Square Garden Entertainment or Madison Square Garden Corporation and would like to reach out to me, my Signal address is robertsilverman.71, and we would love to hear from you because there's more. I mean, the thing about James Dolan is that's sort of very Trumpian in the way he behaves is whatever like weird gambit he's up to or his odd obsession, there's never an innocent explanation as to why he's doing something. The answer is always much, much worse than it seems. And there is no bottom. Like, there is always something more awful underneath the awful thing that you initially uncover. It only gets worse and worse the more you look.
Tell you more about our corporate structure. A CEO, he's a bad motherfucker. He's from a 3-letter organization and personally wants to destroy the nation. The jig is up now, the truth can be told. Since Mr. Jones, he got a number. We're gonna wake up the gods.
All right, folks. Well, we're celebrating 100 episodes. That's why we had Bobby on. We love
that,
Bobby.
we love his story.
We love this man. And we thought we'd do something fun with Bob as one of the nation's foremost expert in different kinds of guys. And, thinking about our show, we're at episode 100 now. So in posting through its spirit, I mean, we're in this for the long haul, and we want to know, we've picked out a short list of characters from sort of the right-wing universes that we cover, and I'm curious to get some takes on where we think these folks might be on our 200th episode, our 500th episode. So the first one I want to start with is Clavicular, who is the looks-maxing...
Great note here, by the way, Jared.
I have notes written down next to all the people on this list.
Can we share them with the audience?
Yeah. No, it says he's dying.
In parentheses, it really laudatory, derogatory. I don't know. But
no, I feel
dying.
like we've been saying he's dying for a while on this. I mean, like I think the part of the appeal of Clavicular, and you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, his star burns very bright because like everybody sees it abruptly going out. Like he is not destined to live long. If you're hammering yourself with, like in your jaw, now there's possibilities he's sensationalizing and making it more of a thing than he actually did. Okay, that's one thing. But he's taking meth like all the time to suppress his eating.
Yeah,
I'll let you guys
he overdosed
discuss amongst yourselves. So
he overdosed on something on a live stream recently, and his publicist said that he was dropping Clavicular until he went to rehab and got health for his substance abuse issues. And I tend to agree. I mean, I think most of the attention around Clavicular and these looks maxing guys is the fact that this is not sustainable. And I think a lot of the kind of public fascination with it is the same way that, it's the same thing that causes people to slow down when they pass a wreck on the side of the road, right?
Oh,
It's
it's a freak
like
show.
like people are just
It's
kind
a
of
Coney
curious
Island freak show.
how is this going to end,
Yeah, I mean,
And
they
I
want.
think whatever it is, it's going to be ugly. I mean, I don't think this guy's going to have star power by the time we get to episode 200, let alone 500. But however this ends, I think it has the potential to be pretty ugly.
I kind of think people want to watch him die. I mean, I think that's the
It's
grim.
logical
It's-
end.
it's-
Even
it's-
his fans?
It's grim,
Yeah,
but
especially
yeah,
his fans.
I mean,
I think they are too. I think there's a good segment of the population who watches Clavicular even sort of passively as a thing that appears on your endless scroll. I mean, he's a kid, he's a child who has been exposed to, who got some very bad ideas in his head. And if you read anything about him, it's clear, he was a teenager who struggled socially, and suddenly he was not only being treated as the epitome of male beauty, but given a massive spotlight and a massive popularity. And we're talking about surveillance. This is a person who has basically chosen to surveil themselves their entire lives. And that kind of thing is necessarily deranging. And I think the punishing nature of the algorithm, of course, and you guys know this from all the reporting you've done, it always demands that you have to keep upping the ante in order to keep listeners engaged and keep growth constant. And I think for someone who is really in a lot of ways a pure creature of the algorithm, there is nowhere to go but more self-destruction. So of course he developed a substance abuse problem. Of course he got to the point where his agent, is telling, or rep is telling him that he needs to go to rehab.
Well, he's
if he
claimed that
were to
he's
go to-
impregnated this woman who is 18, one of the blonde characters who've appeared over the last couple of weeks. He's saying that she's pregnant, and that's his new stunt. It's almost like a soap opera. But Bob, I want to make sure we get everybody in. I want to stay on the clock here. I want to,
Sure.
and I just want to bring up the name Tim Pool, one of our first Who the Hell Is episodes. And in fact, I think it was our second one overall, Jared, right?
Yeah.
Like we did Jack Posobiec. I'm sure the audio on that sounds prehistoric. And then we did this, and this was, I will say, Bob, a huge episode for us. Like I can mark our big jumps in the amount of listeners we got by episode, and I think Jared can too. And this was definitely one of them. And we know he's still wearing the hat. I'm seeing a slightly diminished guy, like in terms of, how much attention he gets. What say you, Jared?
it doesn't seem like his heart's still in it. I mean, he really seems to have just kind of, in a way, given up on himself, if that makes sense.
Well, here's the thing. Tim has spent a lot of time in since Candace Owens began going after is the wrong word, crafting insane conspiracies about TPUSA and Charlie Kirk and everything around that. He talks constantly about how many views she gets by doing this. And he complains very loudly, well, if I wanted to get millions of views, then I could just make up fantastical stories. And I could do that too. But I have way too much integrity to debase myself by, just making up nonsense. And why is the YouTube algorithm promoting her on her front page? Clearly, this is a psyop by the deep state, which wants to promote Candace Owens, because that way it'll make everyone on the right look crazy, and it'll divide the right, and we're all fighting. And by the way, I should be getting more page views, at least as many as Candace, because I'm so honest about it.
Wait, I got a question, Tim Pool question. I want to interject here.
Sure.
That is along these lines. Where does he actually stand on the divide between the sort of philosemitic, Christian Zionists and the anti-Semitic wing of MAGA.
He's he's a fence sitter, as he always was. Like Tim Pool, by the way, never says the word anti-Semitic on air. He never describes anyone as an anti-Semite. He uses phrases like Israeli derangement syndrome. Other times he will affect a German accent and say people who talk constantly about the Jews. Like, he can't bring himself to say, I am distancing myself with these anti-Semites. I think because he realizes that a lot of people on the right who are anti-Semitic make up his audience. He is definitely against it, but he's not going to take any kind of position that might cause him, in theory, to lose viewers. The result kind of sort of, it's because like the job of Tim Pool was always to make people who wanted to support Trump feel good about the fact that they supported Trump. And in the world now, it is really hard for anyone in MAGA to fully throatedly support Trump because what he's doing is against their stated beliefs. So Tim is trying to very cautiously remain sort of a Trump promoter and a MAGA promoter, but still not piss off the Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson, Megyn Kelly wing, but also not really fully like ally with the Laura Loomer MAGA wing. So as a result, he's caught in the middle.
And just losing audience.
And losing audience every day. He started making soy face YouTube thumbnails with headlines like, they finally did it. And it's happening. And that's it.
Let's talk about that Tucker Carlson wing of MAGA now for a second, because this is an interesting group. One thing I pointed out on the last pod, Jared, is that you almost already have to have a very big audience to even do this part. So you get become like very, very, anti-Israel as part of your thing. And all of these type of people, Tucker Carlson being the one we're going to highlight the most, but also Nick Fuentes, Candace Owens, these are all people who had huge, huge audiences before they sort of made this pivot. What do you guys think about this wing?
Well, the note I wrote here is that Tucker Carlson is going to swallow a Zyn nicotine pouch and get diarrhea.
But first of all, I laughed really hard. I was the one who put the laugh on the document. But isn't it Alp? Isn't Alp the Zyn that they sell on the right? Isn't that like on Tucker Carlson?
No.
It's like,
him and his brother made his own nicotine pouch brand because they didn't think that the Zyns were strong enough.
Yeah. Okay. By the way, I've tried Zyn, and like I have it in my mouth for like a few seconds before I feel like I smoked meth or something. It's like so strong. I'm maybe a bit of a wimp when it comes to nicotine, but like it is just like it like made me like nauseous when I tried it.
Would it offend your listeners if I said I had a Zyn pouch in my mouth right now?
Do you ever feel like it's kind of weak?
Yeah, I feel like Tucker. It's how I bond with Buckley. Really, it's more of a Buckley. I'm a Buckley guy more than anything.
I'm such a wuss. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry to all my.
As a.
I do like a cigarette periodically, but I don't.
That was the first time I think I'd seen Buckley Carlson on air. I mean, the weird thing about that apology that Tucker gave is, and a couple of good reporters.
That thing where he's like, I feel bad about leading people to support Trump. That thing.
And I want to credit Justin Barragona over at Zateo, who made this explicit. Like, they weren't apologizing for bringing a fascist regime into being. Both of them are mad because Trump is not of a fascist enough.
Yeah.
They're mad about him not doing more to rewrite the history of January 6th and the COVID vax and not rounding up enough brown people. That's what their critique is. And the war, of course. But a lot of the news organizations that reported out that apology sort of kind of soft pedaled that both of them are much, much further to the right than where Trump is now. And that's what they're mad about.
Yeah, I mean, that's the story with Candace Owens. That's the story with Nick Fuentes. All these people, you get those like Midas touch accounts or whatever circulating clips and being like, wow, Trump's even losing Nick Fuentes or Trump's even losing Tucker Carlson. This seems bad. But it's like he's losing them to the right, not losing them to the left. They don't think
Yeah.
that he's gone too far. They think that he's incompetent and unable to execute the fascist vision that they have.
And they want to inject Israel into it more because there may be some principle there, on one hand, but like I leave that open, that possibility. But they also know that this audience that has been really primed by anti-Semitic conspiracies for a very long time. Now we're about 10 years on from Trumpism. These people have ingested so many of these different memes and things, through the years, that there is real money to be made from poking those little spots that are related to anti-Semitism, right? Where you're talking about, Zog and these type of things. That conspiracy or the idea of using the word Zog, that's even made it into some leftist circles. So there's money to be made by preying on that audience.
Yeah, I think my prediction is no matter how this horrible regime comes to its final end, it will be bad for the Jews. There's a lot of historical accuracy in that, and I think it's going to repeat itself. Like when this war in Iran does end, some people are going to correctly blame the state of Israel, which is not the same thing as Jews, and other people are going to just blame all Jews for this. And it is a little terrifying. The entire, I mean, there's a Rod Dreher interview or article, I forget which, when he took a break from talking about someone's primitive root wiener and said that he thought that something like 40% of Republican congressional staffers were groypers. And I think that's on the low end. And I go back to this article that was written by Alex Perrine in the wake of Charlottesville, which was at splinter.com, RIP though, and which was that Charlottesville was a preview of the Republican Party. That was the article that was written in
that's certainly a
2017.
prescient take, for sure.
And there is a ultra hard right nationalist party that is going to come to being, or at least an ultra hard right faction and voting bloc that is going to exist for a long time. I mean, they've shitposted themselves into becoming actual Nazis.
Yes, they have. On that note, and Jared, I'll let you take it and then we'll go to the next person. I think Tucker is one of the few people in MAGA who has enough, let's put it this way, skill, I guess would be the nice way to put it, He has like a media, he's got skill and he's got enough awareness of people's tastes and where the wind is blowing that I can imagine him doing this probably for as long as we're doing what we're doing. I just don't see him disappearing.
No, I think if Tucker Carlson wanted to, he could be president. I don't think he wants to.
Don't like that one.
I don't like it. I mean, a lot of the fears that we've all had in the Silverman household, that's for sure, is that whatever comes after Trump is going to be both A, further to the right, and B, more competent. And it's very scary.
Well, let's go to the next person. Jack.
on that,
I don't want to think. I don't want to think about that. So let's just keep going.
Okay.
We got Jack Posobiec on the short list. I wrote down that he's going to recreate the Charlie Kirk quote unquote moment for his last gasp of viral fame. But Mike, you've reported on Jack Posobiec a lot. I want to hear where you think he's going. And I think he was interesting to put on this list because the future of Jack Posobiec kind of is also the future of Turning Point USA because he's arguably the most visible person they have on the roster right now, and he's also a clown.
Yeah. Well, it's either him or it's Erica. Those are the two most visible right now for sure. Well, I think that the thing that I've seen over the last year or so, and you guys tell me if you agree with this, for the first time, Jack is really not getting the kind of engagement that he wants from social media.
Yeah.
And I think that he had coasted along very effectively at straddling the two lines, much like much like you were saying that Tim Pool was doing. He was kind of like, hey, I'm kind of an anti-Semitic Nazi, but also I'm a pro-Israel guy who gets along with the party. That was kind of his brand, and that brand has been exposed recently. And he's getting saturated in complaints. I've seen him ratioed multiple times on Twitter, which is his whole world. And people keep bringing up Steve Bannon, who he has a relationship with, and Steve Bannon's involvement with Epstein. I just think that he's gradually, for the first time, losing the edge that he had and is becoming a regular guy. Jack Posobiec was like compelling for MAGA because he was edgy, right? He was scary. He was more extreme, but now the party itself wants something more extreme than him, and he's starting to look just less impressive to these guys. I mean, in any case, his whole resume was inflated with lies. So I just don't think he's going to be. I just don't think he is what he used to be.
I don't ever hear about something, and as a person who by choice checks up on all these weird little guys, I don't hear anything. The juice, for lack of a better word, in the GOP is explicit anti-Semitism and explicit Nazism, and that is what is getting. That is what that is where the conservative base. There's no place for Jack in this world anymore. He's an
I'm going to sum it
establishment
up. Ready
figure.
for this? Tell me what you guys think of this. Jack has become one of the guys who lives in fear of the possibility that Nick Fuentes will get in his replies and say something critical, and then he's going to be swarmed. He's like one of those guys like Matt Walsh and all these guys who look like they are being bullied because they are. They happen to have been the hard right edge of the Republican Party, and now they're being attacked by an edge that's to the right of it.
Sorry, man. If you're going to be punk rock, you got to be really punk rock. Let me make it clear. I do not think being a Nazi is punk rock, but the principle still applies. Like, sorry, eventually all those cool kids become the establishment. Jack Posobiec is as establishment a figure as you will find in the GOP these days. That's
insane, by the way.
Horrifying.
If you stand back, that is insane. But yes.
That is insane. But
literally
but spot
is true,
the
though.
lie. But spot the lie.
And last one we have on our top 5 power ranking, our draft here, Dave Portnoy, which was another episode that Bob joined us on, another pivotal episode. Bobby Downloads.
Yeah, to give it some context, too, just to say that Dave Portnoy had been credited for helping to sway the election, right? The sort of barstool conservatives. Yeah. So that is a part of the right that is worth thinking about in the future. Will the manosphere sports bro thing be a factor again?
I feel a tiny, one, Dave Portnoy and I are only a few years apart in age, and while I have not undergone nearly as extensive a tanning regimen as Dave has, we are in the same age group. And sorry, man, but the kids aren't going to watch a middle-aged man hanging out with 20-somethings and chugging beers and think it's cool anymore. The last time Dave Portnoy popped was when he was very vocally backing the state of Israel. And guess what? The Groypers got all up in his mentions.
And there were all these we covered on. I think we covered on the pod this phenomenon around people throwing coins at Dave Portnoy,
Yeah.
or just trying to bully him over anti-Semitic reasons, et cetera, et cetera. I feel like he's taken on damage from that too.
I feel like, let me make it very clear. Dave Portnoy and I are not close personal friends, not anymore anyway. And but I think it is incredibly bad that he is doing one of his, goofy pizza reviews. And every time he does one, there have been at least one incident where people started shouting anti-Semitic slurs at him. And that's awful. Don't do that to Dave Portnoy. Don't do that to anyone. But he has, like Tim Pool, like Jack Posobiec, Barstool is a gambling concern now, and it's got zero juice, but it apparently keeps chugging along. But Dave Portnoy is just another. Right now, he's just another Jewish person getting screamed at by the madding crowd. And
do you think he's going to have
really
the kind
sad.
of influence that he had? Because I
No.
see this guy. Okay, aside from the anti-Semitic stuff for a second, I see this guy, and he, with all due respect to him, he's just a little older than I am, but he's starting to look kind of, for what he does, he doesn't.
No.
You don't like to see a guy like out there like sipping a hard seltzer, like trying to hit it off with a bunch of guys at Auburn.
Do you want to, I'm sorry, there are not a lot of, I think he's 50 now, or if not, he's in his late 40s, middle-aged.
I think he's 49.
Yeah, middle-aged, like perpetually red,
true.
overweight dudes chugging malt seltzers. That's not cool to the kids anymore. And if you show up at some college frat to host a party, people are going to say, like the old Chris Line joke, you are way too old for the club, man.
Yes.
Like Barstool, there's a larger problem here, which is that sports blogs, are just dead. There are no more sports blogs.
Well, there's no
Of
more
any kind.
written anything these days.
I know,
But you,
sports
through
media
your story
has
at
gotten
Wired,
gutted. Yeah.
through your story at Wired, had a really
I did.
cool thing happen, which is that you're now
did.
friends with Charles Oakley, which
I don't know. I don't know if I would call us friends. We talk.
that's amazing.
Classic thing that somebody who's friends with Charles Oakley would say.
I want to say all credit to Charles Oakley for being one of, I think, 2 to 3 people on the record in this story, I want to applaud him in his courage first and foremost. But getting to talk to one of my childhood heroes, and I think I made it clear to him when we were talking that, like, hi, you're Oak. It's like it goes you, Mace, R.I.P. though, and John Starks on my top 3 Knicks of all time. And getting to talk to that person, absolutely. Every time I saw my cell phone ring and it said Charles Oakley, I thought I was the coolest MFer around. God damn it. That felt so awesome. It makes me deeply happy. And if Charles Oakley, you are listening to this, respect.
You should send him a link to the episode when it's out.
I will. I will. I will absolutely.
I want to hear his thought. I want to hear his thoughts about Jack Posobiec.
Charles Oakley, go on posting through a challenge. I got it right now.
All right, Bob. Well, thanks for joining us for episode 100. It's been a pleasure as always.
Here's to 100 more posting through it listeners. And if I may say so, this has been the Posting Through It show. We talked about some serious, very serious stuff right here, but I gotta go because it's early in the second quarter, and despite me talking about the panopticon and the dangers of life under an authoritarian regime, I want my team to win. So I gotta go.
Let's go, Knicks.